So now that we've gone over our shapes basics, today we're going to be talking about shapes again to form visual groups, but we're going to be talking about things that you should never ever do. So let's get started. Okay, so the first rule is you shouldn't have more than 5 different shape elements within a visual field. Unless those shapes are part of a very specific design and design element, just try to stick to this rule as much as you can. So let's see what's going on here. So this person used a bunch of rectangles and ellipses and, ellipses and arrows, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with this slide that you can't, nobody really understands what the story is here. It's just really hard to follow. And part of it is hard to follow because there's so many shapes and there are so many elements. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 visual groups going on this slide, and even within those there's subgroups and there's lots of colors. There's a lot going on here. So on this slide, they also have more than a couple of shapes going on. You've got this rectangle shape, you've got these 2 photo shapes, you've got a text box shape, this text box shape, and again, this, because what's more important? Is it this one? Is it this one? Who knows? And we've got lots of things going on this centered text, but because it's more than 3 lines, it's hard to read. And what's going on over this? What is it representing? Who knows? Too many shapes going on the slide. Hard to understand where to look. The second rule is never ever type directly into your shapes. So this is a mistake that I see often enough. People will use smart art, or they'll just make a shape and they'll type directly into it. But when you do this, you lose control over the placement of your text. So the default tends to be the text will be in the center of your shape and center aligned, which makes it a little bit harder to read. So here's what it looks like when you type directly into the shape. I made this white shape here, but I don't have real control over where the text is going to sit within that shape. It's going to go outside the boundaries, and it looks like it's too tight. I created my shape, then I inserted another text box over the shape, and now I have so much more control. I can left align the text, I can right align the text. I centered it here. There's a lot more breathing room, and there's borders, right? So you can see that delineation. That control is really important for the look and feel of your overall design. Okay, the last rule, we already know how I feel about smart art, but never ever use smart art directly or just as it's made in Microsoft in Microsoft 365, and don't apply the shape effects, because these antiquated graphics haven't really been updated since the 90s. And you can go online and people will have arguments for smart art is fabulous, but unless you are grounded in the principles of wonderful graphic design and know what you're doing, usually they don't look great. Here are some examples. I pulled this from somebody that was arguing for the use of smart art, but now you've got text which is difficult to see because they've applied this bevel effect and drop shadows, and there's this drop shadow. The contrast between the back arrow and these colors is, the contrast ratio is not high. Over here in this smart art, same thing with the colors. So the distance between this edge and this edge is a little bit wider, and it keeps expanding. You don't have control over the placement of your text box, so it tends to wander around. The beveling in the shape makes it hard to read, and this has a drop shadow and this has a drop shadow. It just adds a lot of visual clutter, a lot of visual noise. Over here, you don't have control of where your dots are placed, and the text is going outside of this shape. So is it part of the group? Is it not part of the group? It's hard to read. You know what I mean? Just don't use them, because smart art looks ugly for the most part. It looks unprofessional. It looks unpolished. So here's a person that went a little cuckoo with just about everything. They did use smart art, but they inserted graphics, and then they inserted more pictures and more pictures, and they went a little bit overboard with these images. I think this is an older image, but the drop shadow in this image is a little hard to see. The readability of this text, along with the beveling, the 3D-ness of the shape, as well as the color selection for the text. They applied a 3D bevel to the text as well as the shape, makes it doubly hard to read. You've got these drop shadows. They used serif text as opposed to a sans serif text, which makes it even more difficult to read on something that's really, really muddy and jumbled together. And, well, actually, well, they kind of respected their boundaries, but even then, that's a little bit off. Your eyes are going in and out. What's happening with these arrows, who knows? And there's a lot of color selection. There's a vast color palette. There doesn't seem to be any gradients between them, and the contrast between the readability of the text and these colors is not very high. So there you go. A lot of things going on here. Don't use smart art. Try to stay away from shape effects and text effects if you can, if you don't know how to use them properly, is the bottom line.